Okay, looking at example 3, we definitely have x squared, but y is easy to solve for in both of these equations. So the first thing I'm going to do is take each equation and solve it for y. Let me just go through the steps. Okay, I want y on the other side, so I'm just going to add y to both sides. And I need it by itself, so I'm going to add 1 to both sides as well. That gives me 3x squared plus 1 equals y. And looking at the second equation, I can just subtract x squared. So my second equation is going to be y equals 11 minus x squared. I'm going to take, now we're going to set these two expressions for y equal to each other. And solve for x. And I've got my x squared on one side. I'm going to get a number on the other side. And that gives 10 equals 4x squared. Divide by 4. And what I get here is 10 over 4 equals x squared. Actually, I'm going to reduce that to 5 over 2. So when I take the square root of both sides, and remember this, especially when we've got x squared showing up, the left-hand side is going to be plus minus. So I get two solutions here. X is equal to positive and negative square root of 5 halves. I'm not going to rationalize the denominator. I don't think we have to do that in the quiz. But now what I have to turn around and do is solve for y. So I'm going to grab the easiest equation that we were given, the x squared plus y equals 11. And I solve that for y by subtracting x squared. Now I'm going to plug in my x squared. So y equals negative plus 11. One thing I want to point out to you is that if you put in, so when we get to problems like these, when we're solving for y, we're actually going to get the same y value when we use both positive and negative. Because with the positive squaring, I'll get a positive. With the negative squaring, I'm going to get a negative. So we actually only get one y to go with both of our x's. All right, let's finish solving. And 5, square root of 5, all squared just gives me 5 halves. So we get y equals negative 5 halves plus 11, which is 22 halves. So it looks like out of this, we're going to get negative 5 plus 22, y equals 17 halves. So our two solutions to this problem are square root of 5 halves and 17 halves, and negative square root of 5 halves and 17 halves. Okay, on to the next problem. Okay, 2x squared minus 6y squared equals 2, and y equals x squared minus 1. So it seems like the easiest thing to do is substitute this expression into the first equation for y. Okay, now squaring that gets a little bit messy, but bear with me. Okay, I'm going to have a trinomial here. So x squared times itself gives me x to the 4th. X squared times negative 1 gives me negative 1x squared. I'm going to double that because I have two of those multiplications. And then negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive 1. Now I'm going to multiply out that negative 6 and see what I've got. Plus 6 times 2 is 12, x squared. I definitely have to talk myself through this. Minus 6 equals 2. And let me combine my like terms. I get negative 6x to the fourth plus 14x squared minus 6 equals 2. Look, because I have an x to the fourth and an x squared, I can try to factor this like a x squared. We'll get what we do. Well, first of all, I got to do a couple of things. I'm going to get a 0 on one side. So I'm saying I'm going to try to factor it. And to do that, I need a 0 on one side. So from that, I get a negative 6x to the fourth minus 8 equals 0. I'm going to factor it. I'm going to make this easy on myself. It looks like all three terms can be divided by a 2. I'm going to make it a negative 2 because I don't like factoring with a negative x to the, for the first term being negative. So negative 2. So that gives me 3x to the fourth minus 7x squared and plus 4 equals 0. Best way to do this is by AC factoring. I'm going to take the 3 and the 4 and I'm going to multiply it. I get 12. Now the factors of 12 that will give me negative 7 are negative 3 and negative 4. So I'm going to rewrite, and I'm also going to give myself a little more room. That didn't work. Just moving that down. All right, so I'm going to use the negative 3 and the negative 4 this way. I'm rewriting that negative 7x squared using those two terms. It will be much easier to factor. I can really drop the negative 2. I guess it's just habit. I don't. So I'm going to, the beginning of my binomials here is going to have a positive 3x squared and a 1x squared. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out which one of these multiplications will give me a 4x and which will give me a negative 4x and which will give me a negative 3x. Well, with the 3x squared here, the only way this is going to work is if I have a negative 1 here. That'll give me my negative 3x squared. So the last multiplication has to give me my negative 4x, and that will work out that way. So, get rid of this. I have 3x squared minus 4 equals 0, and x squared minus 1 equals 0. That's a difference in two squares. That's going to lead to x equals plus or minus 1. And with the 3x squared minus 4, I'm going to need to do some math. So let's give me some room here. X squared minus 1 leads to the zeros, x equals plus or minus 1. I'm going to put those numbers into my expression for y to get my ordered pair. And again, because I'm squaring the number, I get the same exact answer for both the positive and the negative 1. Looks like y equals 0. So that gives me 2 of my points. I'm going to write these on the left because I think I need the room. 1, 0, and negative 1 and 0. And now we're going to use that last factor, 3x squared minus 4, to find the last two solutions. Okay, I'm going to add 4 to both sides, and then divide by 3. So when I take the square root, and also remember plus minus for our two solutions, that's small. So I get x equals plus or minus 4/3. Again, I'm going to use that one equation, the y equals x squared minus 1, to find my y's. So, sorry, that needs to be a square root. So when I take a square root and square it, I just get 4/3. So y equals 4/3. And the same is going to happen with the negative square root of 4/3. Minus 3/3, which looks like it's 1/3. If I don't have any errors. And I don't think I do. So let's write the square root of 4/3 and 1/3, and also a negative square root of 4/3 and 1/3. So there's my 4 solutions. Gnarly problem. All right. Sorry the video went long. See you on the next.